Sir, I am going to ask you one final time to leave the property. The sentence cut through the quiet elegance of Pine Ridge Country Club like a crack across polished glass. Conversation stopped. A server carrying drinks slowed his pace. Two golfers standing near the terrace entrance turned around. Even the receptionist behind the mahogany desk looked up from her computer. For a brief moment, the entire clubhouse seemed to pause. Marcus Ellington stood near the entrance with a small travel bag resting beside his chair. He had arrived less than 10 minutes earlier after a long drive from another property owned by his company. His clothing was simple. A dark quarter-zip pullover, comfortable slacks, walking shoes that had seen plenty of miles. There was nothing flashy about him. No luxury watch visible. No assistant carrying documents. No security team clearing a path. To most people in the room, he looked like a visitor who had wandered into the wrong place. Bradley Whitmore, the membership director, certainly thought so. Bradley stood confidently in front of him with a tablet tucked beneath one arm. Years of managing one of the most exclusive country clubs in the region had given him an air of authority that many members respected. Unfortunately, it had also convinced him that he could identify who belonged and who did not with a single glance. I have already explained the situation, Bradley said. This facility is reserved for members and approved guests. Marcus looked around the clubhouse. The stone fireplace remained exactly where it had been during the renovation project 6 years earlier. The artwork along the walls had changed. The furniture had changed. The atmosphere had changed too. He noticed that immediately. I understand, Marcus replied calmly. His voice carried no frustration, no anger, just quiet confidence. Bradley seemed irritated by the response. Most people became defensive when challenged. Marcus appeared completely unbothered. Then you understand why I need you to leave. Several nearby members exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others appeared amused. One older gentleman sitting near the lounge windows folded his newspaper and began watching openly. Human curiosity always moved faster than golf scores. Marcus rested a hand on his travel bag and looked toward the large windows overlooking the course. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the fairways. Golf carts moved slowly in the distance. Everything looked perfect. Everything except the interaction taking place at the center of the clubhouse. You seem very certain, Marcus said. Bradley smiled. Certainty comes from experience. Marcus nodded slightly. Sometimes. The answer lingered longer than Bradley expected. Nearby, a young operations coordinator named Ethan Cole glanced over from a workstation near the administrative hallway. Something about the exchange felt unusual. He could not explain why. Marcus did not sound like someone who was lost. He sounded like someone who was observing. Bradley stepped closer. Sir, if you cannot verify your membership, I cannot allow you to remain here. A few members nodded in agreement. To them, the issue seemed obvious. To Marcus, it was becoming something else entirely. The clubhouse was no longer evaluating a guest. It was revealing its culture. Bradley believed he had just protected the integrity of Pine Ridge Country Club. He had no idea he was speaking to the one man with the authority to revoke every membership in the building. Marcus Ellington had spent most of his career learning something that wealth could not fix. The moment people recognized his name, conversations changed. Doors opened faster. Smiles became wider. Assumptions disappeared. That was exactly why he occasionally visited his properties without warning anyone. No executive assistants. No advance schedules. No announcements. He preferred seeing what happened when nobody realized who was watching. The clubhouse around him continued operating normally, but the mood had shifted. Members sitting near the lounge area pretended to return to their conversations, yet their eyes kept drifting back toward Marcus and Bradley Whitmore. The receptionist checked guests in while quietly listening. Even the servers moving through the dining area seemed aware that something unusual was unfolding. Marcus noticed every detail. The lighting inside the clubhouse had been upgraded since his last visit. The seating arrangement near the fireplace had changed. New artwork decorated the walls. The physical improvements were impressive. The atmosphere was not. Bradley remained convinced he was handling the situation correctly. Years of enforcing membership policies had trained him to trust his instincts. Members arrived in luxury vehicles. Members carried club credentials. Members greeted staff by name. In Bradley's mind, Marcus fit none of those categories. I am simply following policy, Bradley said. Policies are important, Marcus replied. They usually are. Bradley seemed encouraged by the response. Then you understand my position. Marcus glanced toward the golf course visible through the clubhouse windows. I understand more than you realize. The answer earned a puzzled look from several nearby members. One woman sitting near the lounge entrance lowered her coffee cup and continued watching. Human beings loved certainty, especially when they believed someone else was wrong. Across the room, Ethan Cole remained at his workstation near the administrative hallway. He had attempted to return to his reports several times, but something about Marcus felt strangely familiar. Not because he had met him personally, because he had seen him somewhere before. Ethan could not remember where. The feeling lingered in the back of his mind. Bradley folded his arms. Most people would simply provide proof of membership. Marcus smiled slightly. Most people are not here for the reason I am. Bradley interpreted the statement as another attempt to avoid a straightforward question. Then perhaps you should explain your reason. Marcus looked around the clubhouse once more. The members, the employees, the culture. Everything he needed to understand was already visible. I think I already have my answer, he said quietly. The response confused Bradley even more. To him, the situation was simple. A man without visible credentials had entered a private club. The solution seemed obvious. What Bradley could not see was that Marcus had spent years building organizations by studying moments exactly like this one. Across the room, Ethan's eyes drifted toward a framed display near the administrative corridor. It contained photographs from major club milestones, board meetings, and ownership celebrations. A faint memory surfaced. He looked at Marcus again, then toward the display, then back again. The feeling grew stronger. Somewhere inside that building was a missing piece of information, and Ethan was beginning to suspect that finding it would change everything. Bradley Whitmore felt increasingly comfortable with the attention gathering around the situation. What had started as a private conversation had slowly become the focus of the entire clubhouse. Members lingering near the lounge listened openly now. A group of golfers returning from the course paused near the entrance. Even employees moving between departments found reasons to pass through the room. The audience seemed to reinforce Bradley's confidence. In his mind, the facts were simple. The man standing before him was not behaving like a member. Therefore, he could not possibly belong there. Marcus Ellington remained seated near the fireplace with his travel bag resting beside him. The longer the conversation continued, the more information he gathered. Nobody revealed their character faster than when they believed they held authority. Bradley looked around the room as though presenting evidence to a jury. This club has standards, he said. Those standards exist for a reason. Several members nodded automatically. The phrase sounded familiar because they had heard it countless times. Marcus looked toward him calmly. What standards are those? Bradley smiled slightly. Professional standards. Membership standards. Expectations. Marcus studied him for a moment. And how do you determine who meets them? The question seemed straightforward, but Bradley hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he recovered. Experience. Marcus nodded slowly. Experience can be useful. Bradley folded his arms. It usually is. A few nearby members chuckled quietly. They assumed Marcus was losing an argument. Marcus knew something they did not. The most expensive mistakes often began with confidence. Across the clubhouse, Ethan Cole continued glancing between Marcus and the display wall near the administrative corridor. The feeling of recognition refused to disappear. He walked casually toward the display, pretending to review a maintenance schedule posted nearby. Framed photographs covered the wall. Groundbreaking ceremonies, championship events, board meetings, charity tournaments. Years of club history captured in polished frames. Ethan scanned the images. One photograph immediately caught his attention. It showed a group of executives standing beside the completed clubhouse during a major renovation several years earlier. Ethan stepped closer. His eyes narrowed. One face stood near the center of the photograph. The image was older, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Ethan looked across the room toward Marcus, then back at the photograph. His pulse quickened. Meanwhile, Bradley continued building his case. Real members do not arrive like this, he said. The comment floated across the room. Several people looked toward Marcus's simple clothing and travel bag. A few nodded in agreement. Marcus heard every word. His expression never changed. That calmness was beginning to bother Bradley. Most people became defensive when challenged publicly. Marcus appeared completely at peace. Interesting, Marcus said quietly. "What is?" Bradley asked. Marcus looked around the clubhouse. How quickly people decide who belongs. The room grew slightly quieter. Even some members who agreed with Bradley felt uncomfortable. Across the hallway, Ethan stared at the photograph again. The name engraved beneath it suddenly came into focus. His eyes widened. For the first time since the confrontation began, he realized he might be looking at the single most important person in the entire club. He just was not sure how to tell everyone before the situation became much worse. Ethan Cole could feel his heartbeat accelerating as he stared at the photograph mounted on the wall. The image had been taken during the grand reopening of the clubhouse after a major renovation project. Several executives stood smiling beside club leadership, investors, and board members. Ethan had walked past that photograph hundreds of times without paying much attention. Today was different. Today one face refused to be ignored. He looked from the photograph back to Marcus Ellington, then back again. The resemblance was undeniable. Same posture, same calm eyes, same quiet confidence. Ethan stepped closer to the engraved plaque beneath the frame. He read the names carefully. When his eyes reached the final name, the uncertainty disappeared. A chill moved through him. Across the clubhouse, Bradley Whitmore continued speaking with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. Members remained gathered around the lounge and reception area, openly watching now. The atmosphere no longer resembled a private conversation. It felt like a public judgment. Marcus remained seated near the fireplace, completely composed. His calmness was becoming increasingly difficult for people to understand. Most individuals would have argued. Some would have left. Others would have become angry. Marcus simply observed. Bradley interpreted that silence as weakness. "I have spent 20 years protecting the standards of this club," he announced. "That responsibility matters." Several members nodded. The statement sounded reasonable on the surface. Yet something about it felt different now. People were beginning to notice the contrast between Bradley's certainty and Marcus's patience. Marcus glanced toward the golf course visible through the windows. "Standards reveal character," he said quietly. Bradley smiled. "Exactly." Marcus looked back at him. "Especially when nobody important is watching." The comment lingered in the air. A few members exchanged uncertain looks. They were not entirely sure what Marcus meant, but the statement made them uncomfortable. Across the room, Ethan moved quickly toward his workstation. He opened internal leadership records. His hands moved faster than usual. Search results appeared almost instantly. Executive governance, ownership structure, corporate leadership. Every document pointed to the same conclusion. Ethan leaned back in disbelief. The man sitting near the fireplace was not merely connected to the club. He was the reason the club existed. Meanwhile, Bradley remained focused on proving his point. If you cannot verify your membership, there is nothing more to discuss. Marcus looked at him calmly. "You seem convinced membership determines value." Bradley shrugged. "Membership determines access." The answer drew a few approving nods from nearby members. Marcus remained silent. Sometimes people revealed more through their own words than any argument ever could. Ethan looked toward the clubhouse floor again. The situation had already gone too far. Every additional minute increased the damage. Yet interrupting Bradley publicly carried its own risks. The membership director was one of the most powerful people inside the club. Ethan hesitated. He needed absolute certainty before speaking. One final document appeared on his screen. He opened it. His eyes widened immediately. There was no doubt left now. None at all. As the crowd continued watching Bradley challenge the quiet man near the fireplace, Ethan realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The person being judged by the club was the very person who possessed the authority to redefine its future. The atmosphere inside the clubhouse had shifted from curiosity to tension. People no longer watched because they were entertained. They watched because something felt wrong. The certainty that had surrounded Bradley Whitmore earlier was beginning to crack, even if he could not see it himself. Marcus Ellington remained seated near the fireplace, calm and composed, while conversations throughout the room faded into whispers. Members who had initially supported Bradley now seemed less confident. The longer Marcus remained unshaken, the more difficult it became to believe Bradley's version of events. Ethan Cole stood near his workstation with the leadership records still open on his screen. Every document confirmed the same reality. Every photograph confirmed the same face. Yet he hesitated. Speaking publicly against the membership director could change his career. Remaining silent could change something even bigger. Bradley, unaware of the internal struggle taking place only a few yards away, decided to push the situation further. "I believe we have been more than patient," he announced. The statement carried across the clubhouse. Several members looked up from their seats. Others moved closer. Marcus listened quietly. Bradley pointed toward the entrance. "You have been informed of the membership requirements. You have been given opportunities to verify your status. At this point, I am formally asking you to leave the property." The room became silent. Even the servers stopped moving for a moment. This was no longer a disagreement. It was a public removal. Marcus slowly stood from his chair and rested one hand on his travel bag. His expression remained unchanged. No anger, no embarrassment, no frustration. That calmness unsettled Bradley more than any argument could have. "You seem very determined," Marcus said. Bradley nodded. "I take my responsibilities seriously." Marcus glanced around the clubhouse. The lounge, the reception area, the terrace overlooking the course. The culture of an organization often revealed itself during moments like this. "Clearly," he replied. Bradley interpreted the answer as surrender. "Good. Then we understand each other." Marcus looked directly at him. "I am not sure we do." Several members exchanged uncertain looks. The response landed differently than anything Marcus had said before. Across the room, Ethan finally took a step forward. Then another. His heart pounded. He knew the truth now. He knew exactly who Marcus was. Yet before he could speak, Bradley continued. "Membership exists for a reason. Not everyone belongs in every place." The words hung heavily in the air. Some members looked uncomfortable immediately. Marcus studied Bradley for several seconds. "You are right about one thing," he said quietly. "Not everyone belongs in every position." The comment caused several people to glance between the two men. Ethan stopped walking. The room felt charged with anticipation. Something was approaching. Something inevitable. Bradley believed he had just removed an unwanted visitor from the club. What he did not realize was that within the next few minutes, the authority he trusted most would collide with a truth powerful enough to change the future of every membership in the building. 4. Several seconds after the conversation ended, nobody moved. The clubhouse seemed trapped between two versions of reality. In one version, Bradley Whitmore had successfully enforced club policy. In the other, a truth was waiting just beneath the surface, preparing to change everything. Marcus Ellington stood quietly beside his travel bag. His expression remained calm, almost reflective. The reaction confused everyone watching. Most people who had just been asked to leave a private club would have argued, protested, or walked away in frustration. Marcus did none of those things. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. The simple motion immediately attracted attention. Bradley noticed it first. "If you are calling someone to verify your membership, that will not be necessary," he said. Marcus looked at the screen. "I am not calling about membership." Bradley folded his arms. "Then who are you calling?" Marcus selected a contact and lifted the phone to his ear. The line connected almost instantly. A professional voice answered. "Governance operations." Marcus spoke calmly. "Activate governance protocol Pine Ridge." Silence followed. Then came a response that only a few nearby employees could hear. "Identity recognized. Protocol activation confirmed." Marcus thanked the caller and ended the conversation. That was all. No explanation. No threats. No raised voice. Just 6 words and a confirmation. Several members exchanged confused looks. Bradley actually laughed. It was not a loud laugh, but enough for people nearby to hear. "Governance protocol?" he repeated. "That sounds very official." A few members smiled nervously. Others remained silent. Ethan Cole did not smile at all. The phrase hit him immediately. He had seen it before inside executive governance manuals. Access to that protocol was extremely restricted. Very few people could activate it. Ethan's pulse accelerated. Across the clubhouse, subtle changes began appearing. A supervisor checking schedules on a tablet frowned at the screen. Another employee near the administrative office looked down at a notification and straightened immediately. A receptionist glanced at her monitor twice before quietly calling another staff member over. Small reactions, easy to miss, yet they were spreading through the building. Bradley remained focused on Marcus. "Whatever game you are playing, it is over," he said. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I agree," he replied. The answer sounded different than anything he had said all afternoon. Bradley noticed it. So did everyone else. The room felt unusually quiet. Outside the clubhouse windows, golfers continued moving across the course beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, an entirely different game was unfolding. Ethan looked down at his workstation as a new alert appeared across the screen. His eyes widened instantly. The notification carried executive authorization markings he had never personally seen before. Another alert followed seconds later. Then another. Administrative systems throughout the club were beginning to respond. Managers were receiving messages. Supervisors were checking devices. Questions were spreading. Marcus remained completely still. Bradley still believed he controlled the situation. What he did not realize was that the club had already begun responding to the only authority that stood above every membership, every policy, and every position inside the building. For several seconds after the protocol activation, nothing obvious happened. Then the first notification appeared. A soft alert sounded from a management tablet near the administrative office. A supervisor looked down, frowned, and read the message twice. Moments later, another alert appeared at the reception desk. Then another. Then another. One by one, devices throughout the clubhouse began displaying the same executive-level notification. Employees exchanged confused glances. Managers stepped away from conversations and checked their screens. Members noticed the shift immediately. The atmosphere changed. Bradley Whitmore noticed it as well. "What is going on?" he asked sharply. No one answered. Across the room, Ethan Cole stared at his workstation as a new message appeared in large text across the monitor. Governance protocol active. Owner verification in progress. Ethan felt his heart race. He looked toward Marcus Ellington, then back at the screen, then toward the photograph in the hallway. Everything was connecting now. Another notification appeared. This one was even more direct. Executive authority confirmed. Ethan slowly stood from his chair. Nearby employees were receiving the same message. Several managers looked visibly unsettled. The receptionist covered her mouth in surprise. A member sitting near the fireplace lowered his newspaper completely. Nobody was pretending not to watch anymore. Bradley stepped toward the nearest supervisor. "Show me that screen." The supervisor turned the tablet toward him. Bradley stared at the message. His expression changed instantly. The confidence that had carried him through the afternoon disappeared. He read the notification again. Then again. "There must be some mistake," he said quietly. Ethan finally stepped forward. "There is no mistake." Every head turned toward him. Bradley looked stunned. Ethan swallowed hard but continued. "I checked the governance records. I checked the ownership structure. I checked the executive files." The clubhouse became completely silent. Marcus remained standing beside his travel bag, calm as ever. Ethan looked directly at Bradley. "That is Marcus Ellington." Several members exchanged confused looks. The name meant nothing to some of them. Ethan continued. "Founder, chairman, chief executive officer, sole controlling owner of Pine Ridge Country Club." The words seemed to drain all sound from the room. Another alert appeared across multiple devices at the same time. "Owner verified. Authority level, primary." The message appeared on tablets, computers, and management terminals throughout the building. There was no room left for doubt. The club itself had confirmed the truth. Bradley looked at Marcus as realization finally reached him. The man he had questioned. The man he had judged. The man he had attempted to remove from the property. He was the person who owned the entire organization. Marcus met his gaze calmly. No anger. No triumph. No desire to humiliate him. "You spent a long time deciding who belonged here," Marcus said quietly. "You never stopped to ask who built this place." The words settled over the clubhouse like a final verdict. Around the room, members who had supported Bradley earlier now avoided eye contact. Employees stood frozen. Ethan exhaled slowly. The truth was finally visible to everyone, and Bradley was only beginning to understand what that truth would cost. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything the clubhouse had experienced in years. Guests who had arrived expecting an ordinary afternoon of golf and conversation now stood in the middle of a moment none of them would forget. The truth had been revealed. Marcus Ellington was not a visitor. He was not a confused guest. He was the founder and owner of the entire organization. Yet the consequences of that revelation were only beginning to unfold. Across the clubhouse, management devices continued receiving notifications. Supervisors stared at their screens. Department heads stepped away from conversations to read incoming messages. The governance protocol was moving through the organization with remarkable speed. Bradley Whitmore remained standing near the reception area, struggling to process what had happened. "Mr. Ellington," he began, "I think there has been a misunderstanding." The words sounded weak the moment they left his mouth. Marcus looked at him calmly. "A misunderstanding requires a lack of information," he replied. "You had multiple opportunities to gather information." Nobody argued with that. Too many people had witnessed the entire exchange. Too many people had heard the assumptions. Across the room, Ethan Cole remained near his workstation, watching the situation develop. A new alert appeared on his screen. Then another. His eyes widened. Nearby managers were receiving the same messages. One supervisor quietly lowered his tablet. Another exchanged a worried look with a colleague. The organization was responding at a level most employees had never seen. Suddenly, a secure video conference request appeared on a management terminal behind the reception desk. A senior governance executive from Ellington Leisure Holdings appeared on the screen. The executive immediately recognized Marcus. "Mr. Ellington," he said respectfully, "governance review is active. Initial findings have been confirmed." Every employee within earshot heard the difference in tone. Respect, recognition, accountability. The executive continued. "Membership administration records are now under temporary review." Several managers looked down at their devices as new notifications appeared. "Membership status review initiated. Temporary access audit active." The messages spread through management systems throughout the club. Members began exchanging confused looks. Bradley's face lost what little confidence remained. "Membership review?" one member asked quietly. The governance executive nodded. "Mr. Ellington requested an immediate evaluation of club culture, membership policies, and administrative conduct." Marcus had not raised his voice. He had not threatened anyone. Yet the impact of his decision was already moving through every layer of the organization. Bradley looked toward him. "You are reviewing every membership?" Marcus nodded slightly. "Membership is a privilege. Accountability should be one as well." The statement carried through the room. Several members shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, many began asking themselves a difficult question. Had they remained silent when they should have spoken? Had they accepted behavior they should have challenged? The clubhouse was no longer discussing one incident. It was examining an entire culture. Another notification appeared across management devices. "Membership privileges temporarily frozen pending review." Audible reactions spread through the room. The decision was unprecedented. Yet Marcus remained calm. He had not come to the club intending to make history. He had come to observe. What he discovered had forced a larger conversation. Around the clubhouse, members and employees slowly realized something important. The issue had never been about a membership card. It had always been about who people believed deserved respect before any card was ever shown. As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the fairways outside, the atmosphere inside the clubhouse slowly began to change. The tension that had dominated the room for nearly an hour gave way to something quieter. Reflection. Guests who had gathered to watch the confrontation now stood in small groups, discussing what they had witnessed. Employees returned to their duties, but their conversations carried a different tone. Nobody would forget what had happened. Marcus Ellington stood near the large windows overlooking the course he had helped build years earlier. The green fairways rolled across the landscape beneath the golden light of late afternoon. For a moment, he simply looked outside. The club had always been more than a business investment. It represented a vision, a place where excellence, professionalism, and community were supposed to coexist. That vision mattered, which was why what happened inside the clubhouse mattered as well. Behind him, the governance review continued. Administrative teams were already documenting events. Membership records were being evaluated. Leadership assessments had begun. Bradley Whitmore stood quietly near the reception area. The confidence that once defined him had disappeared. He understood now that the issue had never been about protecting standards. It had been about the assumptions he made before seeking facts. Marcus turned toward him. The room gradually became quiet again. People listened, not because they feared authority, because they sensed something important was about to be said. This club was never built for a specific type of person, Marcus said calmly. It was built around a specific type of character. Nobody interrupted. Marcus continued. Respect, integrity, professionalism. Those values mean nothing if they only apply after someone proves who they are. Several employees nodded. A few members lowered their eyes. The statement felt personal because many people realized they had remained silent during moments when speaking up would have been easier. Ethan Cole stood nearby, listening carefully. Earlier that afternoon, he had simply been an operations coordinator trying to understand what felt wrong. Now he understood something much larger. Leadership was not about titles. It was about the willingness to pursue the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Marcus looked around the clubhouse one final time. The lounge, the dining area, the reception desk, the people. Membership can be granted, he said. Membership can be suspended. Membership can be revoked. The room remained silent. Respect should never require approval first. The words settled across the clubhouse with more force than any executive order could have delivered. No applause followed. None was needed. The lesson was already understood. Outside, golf carts moved quietly across the course. Inside, employees resumed their responsibilities. Members returned to their tables. The club itself continued operating. Yet something fundamental had changed. The culture had been forced to examine itself. And that examination would leave a lasting impact long after the governance review ended. Marcus picked up his travel bag and began walking through the clubhouse. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. People simply stepped aside as he passed. Not because he was the owner, but because they finally understood what should have been obvious from the beginning. A person's worth cannot be measured by appearance, assumptions, or introductions. And as the evening light settled over Pine Ridge Country Club, that lesson remained behind long after Marcus disappeared down the hallway, becoming part of the future he had chosen to protect.